Call to order. The responsibility of this board is to carry out locally the Commonwealth policy to protect against and minimize pollution and despoliation of sediment in wetlands, streams, and lakes in James City County, which are tributaries to the Chesapeake Bay. We have a member that we wish to participate remotely due to COVID-19 concerns, and we have a quorum physically present at this meeting tonight. Those present must vote to allow each member to participate remotely. May I have a motion to allow David Gussman to participate remotely?
So moved. Aye.
Aye.
Here.
Here. Here.
Here.
Here.
Davey, can you hear the?
I can hear you, but I could not hear her.
Okay, can you tell us from your location where you're participating tonight?
Yes, 7308 Church Lane, Toano.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gussman. Go ahead.
You all have received the minutes. Are there any concerns?
Nope.
Nope. And the minutes are accepted. Public hearings. So for tonight, the outline for tonight's public hearing will be a staff presentation followed by any questions or clarifications from the board. Then the public hearing will be opened. At that time, anybody wishing to speak may do so once called upon by the chair. All public speakers must state their name and address for the record. After all wishing to speak have done so, the public hearing will be closed and discussion among the board will start.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, Watershed Planner, here to present CBPA-20-0148. Mr. Christopher Hakeem has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of 2 retaining walls on property located at 236 William Barksdale within the Kings Mill subdivision and the College Creek watershed. Parcel was platted in 1985 prior to the adoption of the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance in 1990. Total lot size of this property is 1.19 acres, of which 77% is located within the RPA. Current site conditions include eroding slopes in the rear and side of the property. The applicant is proposing to construct 2 retaining walls in order to alleviate this erosion, equating to approximately 160 square feet of encroachments into the landward 50-foot RPA. Required mitigation for this amount of impact to the RPA equals 1/2 unit, which is 6 shrubs. No mitigation plan has been submitted at this time. Staff has evaluated this application and exception request for the construction of the retaining walls. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the retaining walls are accessory in nature. Board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied by Chapter 23, Chesapeake Bay Preservation of the James City County Code to other property owners similarly situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 of the James City County Code and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. That this exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, nor does the request arise from conditions or circumstances either permitted or non-conforming that are related to adjacent parcels, and that reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff's view of this application is that it meets all 5 of the conditions presented above and is approvable. Should the board also find the exception request meets all 5 of the conditions above, staff suggests the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits to include a building permit if applicable, as required for the project. A mitigation plan consisting of 6 shrubs be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division. That a surety of $250 be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee these plantings. And this exception request approval shall become null and void if construction is not begun by February 10th, 2022, with written request for an extension To this exception, be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than December 30th, 2021, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. For a brief presentation, again, the applicant requests is construct 2 retaining walls on property located at 236 William Barksdale within the College Creek watershed and is outlined here in blue. Aerial photography of the parcel in question outlined here again in blue with the project locations here on the side yard and the rear. Topography shows the sloping nature through here and along the side. The floodplain as it affects this property, and the resource protection area. Site plan that was submitted to this office, the red lines here showing the resource protection area, seaward 50-foot RPA, and the landward 50-foot RPA. The proposed retaining walls outlined in yellow, with the house here in the center. Some site photographs from the side yard showing the flagging where the retaining walls will be, or the retaining wall on the side. Looking back towards the street. I'm noticing here, while there's mulch here, there was also filter fabric underneath that is exposed currently, or exposing, and portions of the yard are starting to experience some erosion. And here in the back, with more of this area continuously washing down. Again, staff does recommend approval of this application or exception request, given that all other necessary local and state and federal permits are required. Then mitigation plan of 6 shrubs be submitted. That a surety of $250 be paid and in place prior to the commencement of work. And this exception request approval shall become null and void if construction has not begun by January 13th, 2022, with written request for an extension submitted no later than December 30th, 2021, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. Thank you for your time, and happy answering your questions that you have currently.
Chairman, how high will the wall be?
I believe it will be 3 feet.
Will the use on the house side of the wall be similar to its current use? Mulched area?
Yes.
Thank you.
I don't have any, sir.
Thank you.
We'll go ahead and open the public hearing. Is there anybody who'd like to speak?
Evening.
I'm Chris Hakeem, 236 William Barksdale. Are there any questions I can clarify for you?
Just the questions that I put to Trevor on the height and use behind the wall.
I think the height is probably going to be closer to 2 feet. It's going to require a minimal amount of reinforcement there. We've been there for 20 years, and it's just been a pretty tedious process every year of mulching and watching the mulch wash down the hills. So, I think it would be very beneficial given the grade of these slopes to just try to hold some of that back.
Is it going to be a block wall or a wooden wall?
A block wall, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
I can sympathize with you. How many times do you have to replace the mulch a year?
We could easily do it twice a year, you know.
Yeah, it's no question in my mind that you need a wall there.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, that would help.
Other questions? All right. Thank you, sir.
You.
We'll close the public hearing and we'll open board discussions. Oh, I apologize. Is there anybody else who'd like to speak? All right. I will close the public hearing and open board discussions.
Mr. Chairman, based on Mr. Trevor's presentation of the slides, I'm of the opinion that a wall is certainly needed there. I plan to vote.
I concur with Mr. Apperson.
Okay, can I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the board vote to accept CBA 20-00148 for for 2 retaining walls, vote to adopt approve the plan as presented by Mr. Long.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Gusman?
Yes.
Okay, motion carries.
Good evening, Board. Mike Wilson here to present KCBPA 20-0153, Mr. and Mrs. Gerard and Carrie Morelli. Mr. Wayne Savage of Bay Design Group has applied for Chesapeake Bay exception on behalf of Mr. and Mrs. Gerard and Carrie Morelli for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a pool and pool house on property located at 164 West Landing within the Kings Mill subdivision and the College Creek watershed. Total lot size for this property is 1.69 acres, of which 79% is located within the RPA. The applicants are proposing to construct a pool and pool house located on the property, equaling approximately 1,100 square feet of impervious area encroachments into the landward 50-foot RPA. There is an existing gravel area proposed to be removed, of which 45 square feet are located within the landward 50-foot RPA. Therefore, the total impacts to the landward 50-foot RPA equal 1,061 square feet of new impervious area. The applicants are also proposing a new lawn area of approximately 750 square feet in the RPA and two infiltration BMPs. The required planting mitigation for this amount of impervious cover equals 3 planting units, which is 3 canopy trees, 6 understory trees, and 9 shrubs. While no mitigation plan has been submitted at this time, we will make that a condition of the approval should the board do so. It is also noted that there is a public pool within the Kings Mill subdivision. Staff has evaluated this application and the exception request for the construction of the pool and the pool house. This application does meet the ordinance conditions in sections 2311 and 2314 and should be heard before the board because the pool and pool house are accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to 23.7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions: that the exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief, that granting the exception will not confer upon the applicant any special privileges denied by Chapter 23 to other property owners similarly situated in the vicinity, that the exception request is in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 and is not of substantial detriment to water quality, that the exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, nor does the request arise from conditions or circumstances either permitted or non-conforming that are related to adjacent parcels, and 5, reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Staff's view of this application is that it does meet all 5 of those conditions as presented above, and it is approvable. Should the board also find the exception request meets all 5 of those conditions, staff suggests the following conditions be incorporated into that approval: that the applicant must obtain any other necessary federal, state, local permits as required for the project, including an erosion sediment control plan and land disturbing permit, that the turf love program be implemented for the property. The infiltration BMP shall be built to the Department of Environmental Quality Stormwater Design Specification Number 8 infiltration practices, the current version, and shall encompass at least 522 square feet of surface area as proposed on the plan. That a vegetative mitigation plan consisting of 3 canopy trees, 6 understory trees, and 9 shrubs be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division. That a surety of $1,500 be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office be submitted to guarantee the plantings. That this exception request become null and void if construction is not begun by February 10th, 2022, and that written requests for an extension to the exception shall be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than December 30th, 2021, 6 weeks prior to that expiration date. And I'll direct your attention to your screens for a brief presentation. The applicant request again is for construction of a pool and a pool house at property known at 164 West Landing, shown here in blue in the Kings Mill subdivision within the College Creek watershed. Closer up picture of the property. There is a sanitary sewer and sanitary sewer easement to the west of the property. Topography as it affects this property, these are 5-foot contour intervals. The floodplain as it affects this property, this project does not affect the floodplain, the regulatory floodplain on this property. The RPA as it affects this property. And then from the application, the site plan. This is the 50-foot RPA buffer and the 100-foot RPA buffer on both sides. The pool shown here in this rectangle here, the yellow part is what is impacting the landward 50-foot RPA. And then behind the pool, on the remainder of the knoll that exists behind the house, would be a new lawn area of approximately 750 square feet. I did forget to mention there is a gravel area here that will be removed, and that will be credited towards the mitigation component. From the site plan that was submitted, there's an infiltration trench here and an infiltration trench here. While this one up by the driveway is technically outside of the RPA, the stormwater from the driveway and this area does run down this ravine directly into the RPA, and staff does support a infiltration trench in this location. The infiltration trench over here would collect runoff from the impervious cover directly resulting from the construction of this project and part of the house in this area. Again, that runoff currently runs untreated into the RPA. Mitigation they're proposing would be in this area behind the pool and then scattered amongst the new lawn that they're proposing as well. Some site photographs from the back porch steps. The pool would be in this area. The gravel area is just right in here. From the back side of the pool, looking back at the house. And then staff recommendations. Again, staff does find the application to be approvable with the following conditions: that any other necessary local, federal, state permits are required. This does include an erosion sediment control plan and land disturbance permit. That turf love program be implemented on the property. That the 2 infiltration basins be built to the design of DEQ infiltration practices number 8. That a surety of that's the wrong number there. Surety of $2,500 be paid. No, I'm sorry, that number is correct. $1,500 be paid and in place prior to commencement of work. That the exception request shall become null and void if construction is not begun 1 year from tonight. And then written requests for extensions be submitted no later than 6 weeks prior to that expiration date, which is December 22, 2021. Be happy to answer any questions the board may have on this matter.
Chairman, Mike, is this a recreational facility, or is there, I mean, some other requests that have come before us have been for medical reasons and so forth. You mentioned there's another pool within the community, but is there access issues or anything of that nature?
I don't know the answer to that question, Mr. Rhoda. I'd defer that to the applicant.
Did you,
We just wanted to, I'm sorry, we just wanted to point out to the board that the neighborhood does have public pool facilities.
follow-up, the grass area, I noticed it extends beyond or into the seaward 50 feet. Is that purely an aesthetic feature?
I would again defer to the applicant. It is on the remainder of the knoll that would be out there. They're not proposing to impact steep slopes or anything with, or any significant regrading with that lawn installation.
And that's currently wooded right now?
It's regenerative growth. It's in this area back here. I believe the area was cleared by a previous homeowner and then let go. And it looks to be 10 to 12-year-old pines and sweet gum.
Just to clarify, by the plans they've submitted, though, that lawn area, that 750 square feet, would be inside the seaward?
The way it's drawn, shown, outlined in this graphic, it is. If the board wanted that lawn to be outside of the seaward 50, we could certainly make that a condition as well. I'm not 100% sure, or I'm pretty much confident that what's outlined there is not exactly what was or is proposed. It's just a graphic representation of the lawn area.
Okay. Questions?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
I have one question, just because I don't know, but where do the pools drain to? Where do they overflow to? Do they go into the sewer, or is there a?
No, they would drain. They would be drained overland, backflowed. I believe this pool is a saltwater pool, but again, I'll defer that to the applicant as opposed to a chlorinated pool.
Questions for staff? David, do you have any questions for the staff?
No.
All right, thank you. We will open the public hearing.
Some of the questions, saltwater pool, spoke to that. And as far as
I'm sorry, Mr. Morelli, could you start over again?
Sure.
When you weren't at the microphone
I'm sorry.
and the recording didn't pick you up.
I'm sorry, yes. So my name is Gerard Morelli. I'm the owner of 164 West Landing, and well, thank you for your time tonight, first of all, but just to clarify a few of the questions that were asked, it will be a saltwater pool, that's the plan. And as far as the lawn area, I mean, we'll put that exactly where you guys tell us to. You know, it's just proposed there, and, you know, whatever the constraints you guys give us, we'll abide by that.
Thank you, Mr. Morelli.
I'm happy to answer any other questions that may have come up.
I appreciate you putting in the infiltration trenches. Obviously, we're trying to control the amount of stormwater that goes untreated into the wetlands and streams. The drain for the pool, when you have to back flush it or change the water out, how does that get accomplished?
That I can't speak to. I'm not 100% sure.
I have no more questions.
Larry?
That would, to flush that pool out, if you were going to drain it, is that it sounds like you don't have the answer to that situation. You're going through the infiltration system there for your runoff, but you got a concentration of pretty good size amount of water comes out when you flush that pool out, so is that a drain that just goes straight out, or you don't
Yeah,
know?
see, again, I've never owned a pool before. Other people I know that have saltwater pools, they don't drain them, so I don't know what the,
It'll go through the filtration system, or whether it will go?
yeah, like I said, I don't even know if you need to drain it.
Other questions? No? All right, thank you, sir. Is there anybody else here who'd like to speak on this matter?
I'm Wayne Savage, professional engineer for the project. I'm sorry I'm late. I thought the meeting was at 5:30. I think they used to be at 5:30 maybe.
It used to be at 7.
Oh, well, I just missed it. I'm sorry. I thought they were 5:30, so I sincerely apologize. I didn't get to hear what Mr. Wilson had to say. So I'm not quite sure what questions were asked, so again, I apologize. As far as the backwash, though, I get asked that question actually on a fair amount of pools. The problem is, depending on the type of pool that's being installed, a lot of times the owner doesn't even know. In this situation, he's got a saltwater pool. I wasn't aware of that until 3 minutes ago. So that really depends on the pool contractor, but the purpose of the infiltration trenches is to not only pick up the stormwater, but also to incorporate any backwash filtering that will be done. I know some pools are handled, they have a backwash system that does an automatic backwash, and that we actually sometimes we even put notes on our plans depending on the county or the board that we're working with. We will put notes on our plans to the effect that the contractor will direct all pool backwash into the BMP. That way we can ensure that backwash is being directed down into the ground, it will be filtered, and the nutrients from that will be captured before they reach the protected areas, which I know is a big concern. I have this problem in Middlesex, and we usually address it. And it's becoming more and more of a thing to address for all boards. So if that's a note, or if that's something we need to coordinate with the contractor, that's a condition, I think that's fine to add that. Yes, in this case, we did add the infiltration trenches. We understand that we're encroaching into the buffer on this lot. It's pretty tight. There's not a lot of room. We got steep slopes on both sides. So we're kind of using the only high ground, if you will, or flat area to put the pool in. But we did incorporate the infiltration trenches to try to mitigate for our impacts, and we're also trying to pick up some of the roof drains. So not only our impacts, but also some of the existing impervious surfaces that are on the site, as well as including the planting mitigation that the county would typically require. So we tried, on these pools, as an engineer, as a designer, I like to go over and above, what's typically required when asking for an accessory structure in the RPA. So. Unless there's any additional questions, I think that's all I have. Again, I don't know what Mr. Wilson, if he had any concerns or.
Mr. Savage, there were some comments regarding the encroachment into the seaward 50 feet with the lawn area. Obviously trying to avoid impacts to the RPA buffer in general, but
Sure.
specifically to the seaward 50 feet.
Yeah.
The applicant seemed to be amenable. Is it possible that that could be designed so that it eliminated that encroachment?
I wasn't aware of impacts into the seaward. Are we talking about some of the removal of the trees?
So it was at least presented on the graphics, and Mike, maybe you can clarify with Mr. Savage.
Right, which is predominantly outside of the 50.
Right, there was concerns, and I explained to the board that this was just a graphic representation
Okay.
of the lawn area.
Sure.
And
Okay. Of existing lawn area?
the
Or-
proposed 750 square foot lawn area.
Okay. Yeah, I think if the applicant is fine with taking that out, I don't think that's a problem at all. And I think honestly that area could probably be added. The vegetation that we're adding can be added, which I think we're proposing to add it in that area anyway. I believe so. We're not planning to leave it as grass. I think the idea was to leave it as a vegetated, as in shrubs and trees anyway. So I think that's definitely agreeable, and I think that was the intent of our plan.
Thank you.
Right, any other questions? David, do you have any questions?
No questions from me.
All right, thank you, sir.
Thanks, everybody.
All right, we'll close the public, oh, sorry, is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, then we'll close the public hearing and open the board discussions.
Mr.
I have a
Chairman, I
comment.
think the addition of the infiltration for both the stormwater and backwash helps mitigate some of my concerns for the encroachment into the RPA buffer. Clearly, the area where the pool is already open, it's not forested, and so I believe that that would be an improvement. I would condition any approvals on removal of the grassed area encroachment into the seaward 50 feet.
I'm sorry, could you say that last part again? I think I agree with you, is that encroachment down there by the seaward.
So my comment was that any motion to approve, if it were offered by me, would recommend removal of the proposed grass area in the seaward 50 feet.
Also, my one concern also is that if they drain that pool, all that's salt water. That goes right out into the RPA area. It'll go through the filtration, but it's still that amount, that volume. I just have concerns about that going down into the wetlands area. Waltrip, do you have any?
We experience that backwash is going to be run through the filtration system.
Yes.
I thought he said that the backwash will go into the infiltration basin. It won't be discharged overland.
Did you ask that question again, David?
My understanding is, I thought the consultant said that the backwash would be discharged into the infiltration basin, not be discharged overland.
Point of clarification, Mr. Wilson, the design spec that you noted in your presentation, does that include an underdrain?
It can if the soils don't infiltrate properly. In this case, I believe the soils are good for infiltration.
So then it's just a function of the rate at which they discharge so that it can absorb the volume of water.
Okay. So I think the answer, David, to your question is yes. We'll go through the infiltration system.
Okay.
If there are any other questions, no? Can we have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I move that we adopt the resolution to grant the exception request for Chesapeake Bay Board case CBPA 20-0153 at 164 West Landing with a condition that there be no encroachment channelward of the 50-foot seaward limit of the RPA.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson? Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Trevor Long, James City County Watershed Planner, here to present CBPA 20-0147. Mr. Jesus Mancisador has applied for a Chesapeake Bay exception for encroachments into the RPA buffer for the construction of a pool on property located at 2416 Sarah Spence within the vineyards at Jockey's Neck subdivision and the College Creek watershed. Parcel was platted in 1997 before the adoption of the changes in the Chesapeake Bay Ordinance in 2004. A Total lot size of this property is 1.18 acres, of which 75% is located within the RPA. The applicant is proposing to construct a pool located on the property equating to approximately 650 square feet of encroachments into the landward 50-foot RPA. Additionally, the applicant is proposing a paver patio area surrounding the pool equating to approximately 1,200 square feet of impervious area. Required mitigation for this amount of impact to the RPA equals 5 canopy trees, 10 understory trees, and 15 shrubs. It is noted that there is a public pool within the vineyards at Jockey's Neck subdivision. Pool location will be within a currently fenced-in portion of the backyard. At this time, no mitigation plan has been submitted. Staff has evaluated the application and exception request for the construction of a pool. This application meets the ordinance conditions in sections 23-11 and 23-14 and should be heard by the board because the pool and patio area are accessory in nature. The board may grant exceptions to section 23-7 if the application meets the following 5 conditions. The exception request is the minimum necessary to afford relief. Granting the exception will not confer upon the applicants any special privileges denied by Chapter 23, Chesapeake Bay Preservation of the James City County Code to other property owners similarly situated in the vicinity. The exception request will be in harmony with the purpose and intent of Chapter 23 of the James City County Code and is not of substantial detriment to water quality. The exception request is not based on conditions or circumstances that are self-created or self-imposed, nor does the request arise from conditions or circumstances either permitted or non-conforming that are related to adjacent parcels, and that reasonable and appropriate conditions are imposed which will prevent the exception request from causing a degradation of water quality. Should the board find that the exception requests meet all 5 of the conditions above, staff suggests the following conditions be incorporated into the approval. The applicant must obtain all other necessary federal, state, and local permits as required for the project, including the submittal of an erosion and sediment control plan and a land disturbing permit. A mitigation plan consisting of 5 canopy trees, 10 understory trees, and 15 shrubs be submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division. A surety of $2,500 be submitted in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office to guarantee the plantings. In this exception request, approval shall become null and void if construction has not begun by February 10th, 2022, with written request for an extension submitted to the Stormwater and Resource Protection Division no later than December 30th, 2021, which is 6 weeks prior to the expiration date. I'll now divert your attention to the screen for a brief presentation. Again, the applicant is requesting to construct a pool with a decking around it, or paver patio area, on property located at 2416 Sarah Spence, outlined in blue. Aerial photograph of the lot. This is the lake that the property sits on and the fenced-in area that the pool is being proposed in. Topography on the lot, it's a peninsula lot, and it slopes downwards towards the water on all sides. And the resource protection area as it affects this property, encompassing the entirety of the backyard and side yards. Site plan that has been submitted to this department, with the proposed pool being here in blue and the proposed patio here in gray. An existing deck that currently is situated on the property, and the resource protection area outlined here in red. Some site photographs, the deck being shown up here in the corner, and this being the general area of the pool and patio area. Looking backwards towards the house, standing about the edge of the proposed pool. Should the board wish to approve this application and exception request, the following conditions be incorporated into this approval: that the applicant obtain all other necessary local, state, and federal permits as required, to include an erosion sediment control plan and a land disturbing permit; that a mitigation plan of 5 planting units be submitted to this department; and that a surety of $2,500 be paid in place prior to the commencement of work in a form acceptable to the James City County Attorney's Office; and that this exception request approval shall become null and void if construction has not begun by February 10th, 2022, with written requests for this extension be submitted no later than 6 weeks prior to its expiration date. Thank you very much, and happy to answer any questions that you have at this time.
Trevor, can you comment on, I don't recall on your graphic whether you showed the difference between the 50 and the 100-foot RPA limits?
I believe, due to the size of the graphic, the 50 would be just outside of this showing. But with 50 foot should basically, it possibly cuts through the edge of the fenced in area, but should be right along this slope.
Thank you.
Patio area gonna be all concrete?
I believe they will be pavers.
Pavers.
Yes.
Other questions for staff? Okay,
Thank you.
thanks. All right, open the public hearing for anyone who wishes to speak.
Good evening, gentlemen. I'm Jesus Mancisidor. I live at 2416 Sarah Spence. So the pavers is optional. We would even consider doing gravel, like decorative gravel. The concern is really the pool. You know, we have a pool in the neighborhood, and prior to COVID, it really wasn't a necessity. And still, you know, not a need, but to an extent, it is more of a need now. We have 2 young children that are very athletic and very active. They're on a swim team, and with the pool restrictions and numbers spiking again in COVID, we really need something for them to do physically. For myself, collegiate ball and military has caught up with me, so it's kind of the last form of exercise that I have at this point without really putting my body through any more of a rigorous pounding. So do you have any questions for me at this time?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, during the last hearing, you heard us discuss to a degree the infiltration
Yes.
to help capture the sheet flow.
So very similar. The pool engineer was leaving it to the county because they felt that there was enough land and mitigation to be able to sustain the drainage of the pool. But they also said that, you know, they could put a drainage system if that's what was requested. So
I think the county treats graveled areas similarly as to a paver, the use
Sure.
of a paver. So I'll leave it to you to decide what option you'd like to pursue. But I would very much be in favor of some type of infiltration around the patio so that that drainage could be treated before discharge.
yes, absolutely.
Is this a saltwater pool?
It is, and that's what we were planning on. But we were going back and forth. We were kind of, again, not knowing. We're in the same boat. Well, we've never owned a pool before, so we didn't know restrictions one way or the other, if one is more favorable or one is less favorable. So we were leaving it open to what the board and what the county was going to suggest. Our preference would be saltwater. Just I like a lot less maintenance. So
I don't have any questions, Mike.
I like the infiltration that's been discussed. I think it's pretty much agreed on already without a vote, but I would prefer for the infiltration to be part of the permit. If that's agreeable with you, sir.
oh, absolutely, yes, sir.
And the gravel instead of the solid pavers.
Sure.
All right, Mr. Waltrip?
Probably so, yes, sir. If
Just
you
want to
feel
see
like
if you
it.
had any questions for the
I agree
gentleman.
with everybody here on what's filtration down the pool.
Mr. Apperson, I'm not questioning your recommendation for the gravel. I just was curious if staff would comment on that in terms of stormwater-related issues. I'm just thinking of walking around a pool with gravel around it versus a solid
Exactly.
block.
I envisioned a liner, you know, and then a gravel that is trackable, not the pea gravel, not small gravel, but a stone that's smooth to the foot and comfortable, and it wouldn't move when you stepped on it. I'm pretty sure that's what staff would ask for too. That was my thinking, sir.
The specific material for us is not, we would have no say as staff in the specific material. To answer Mr. Roadley's question, whether stormwater for gravel versus pavers versus concrete is treated differently. Concrete would be the most impervious. Gravel would have a little bit of pervious pore space between the stone, and the same with the paver if they're designed with a gravel under base. So if I'm understanding the questions correctly, Mr. Apperson was inquiring about the materials of being gravel or pavers versus concrete, if I may paraphrase, and requesting infiltration of the backflow from the pool itself into some sort of infiltration type system. It certainly could be designed for either set of circumstances. The infiltration basin could be designed for either concrete or paver installation, with the caveat that it be designed also to handle the backflow from the pool. I believe I've captured everybody's concerns.
We are talking on the outside of your concrete patio, on the outside where
Yes, sir.
everything's draining to.
Yes, sir. I envision this being between the pool surface or the improvements and the lake. The ground naturally drains that way anyway, so you wouldn't want to necessarily buck grade, even though in the backyard the grade isn't significant. It does still drain from the house towards the lake. So the water would go over the patio and into an infiltration trench, infiltrate any of the overland flow from the improvements, plus the backflow, the backwash from the pool, before any of that could get into the neighborhood lake.
That's gonna be a ditch with stone in it, and that would.
Yeah, it would have some stone and other things. This particular installation, Mr. Roadley, I believe the soils are a little tighter than the previous application, and it may actually require an underdrain. I don't want there to be surprises.
I think the issue is what, after you have your ditch with the stone in it, is the surface above it walking on it, I think is what their issue.
No, that would be a planting bed type area. And I'm not gonna, I won't design it for Mr. Mancisidor. He could certainly put some of his required planting mitigation in that infiltration trench to help with the nutrient uptake.
Okay, are there any other questions? All right. Mr. Gussman, do you have any questions for the applicant?
No,
All
no
right.
questions from me.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Is there anyone else who'd like to speak on this matter? Okay, we will close the public hearing and open the board discussions. I think we're all kind of in agreement that infiltration should be included in the application. I think that the intent of the board is really to leave the final decision on the patio to pavers or stone up to the applicant as well. Any?
Chairman, if the board is in agreement, I will make a motion that we adopt the resolution to grant the exception for Chesapeake Bay Board case CBPA 0147 at 2416 Sarah Spence, with the condition that he incorporate an infiltration system to capture runoff and backwash.
Roll
Sure.
call?
Okay, Mr. Roadley? Yes. Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
Yes,
The motion carries.
Okay. I think that's all of the public hearings. So now to board considerations.
Give me 1 second to finish writing out that
Sure.
additional condition, please. Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Exception request for Ms. Rennie Andrews. She's requesting an extension to CBE 18-058, which was originally granted on March 14, 2018, and extended twice to March 11, 2021. She's been unable to proceed with her project and complete the required mitigation due to issues with her HOA and some sinkholes in her backyard forming around some storm pipes. The staff does concur with her request with the stipulation that all permit conditions except for the expiration date be reauthorized and a new date of expiration be March 11, 2023. That is a 2-year extension, and if granted, this would be the 3rd extension for this project. Be happy to answer any questions the board may have on this matter.
Why grant a 2-year extension? Is it going to be, are the sinkholes going to be repaired by the local government or?
The sinkhole issue is an issue with the HOA, and she's been unable to reach satisfactory conclusion to the problem in the preceding 2 years. So staff's thought was an additional 2 years would give her that ability to work with the HOA to get those problems resolved. And if not, you know, in 2 years, it's up to the board to decide if they want to extend it further. There's been one project where when they came in for an extension request, it was their 4th or 5th time. One member of the board said this would be the last he would vote for an extension. Just FYI.
Thank you.
I don't see anything wrong with 2 years.
I have no issue.
More questions for the staff? Board discussions? I think we're in agreement. All right, and so can I have a motion?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to make a motion that the board vote to adopt CBE 18-058-447 Pleasant View Drive Memorial Garden.
Mr. Roadley?
Yes.
Mr. Waltrip?
Yes.
Mr. Apperson?
Yes.
Mr. Dunn?
Yes.
Mr. Gussman?
yes,
The motion carries.
All right. Mr. Chair, members of the board, I have 2 presentations. I'll keep them brief. I'm not used to doing it this way. Trevor, how do I do this? Just hit F5. Thank you.
Go.
End of year review for both the wetlands and the Chesapeake Bay Board. Just give you gentlemen a brief rundown. As you know, local Bay program, James City County is one of 84 localities were located here that are within the Chesapeake Bay Preservation area of the state. We did adopt our ordinance August 6, 1990. It was revised in 2004, as you are aware. And then Chapter 23 is the part of the county code that deals with Chesapeake Bay preservation. For the wetlands program, we are one of the localities within the Virginia coastal zone here. We undertake the process to regulate total local tidal wetlands through the citizen board. And Chapter 22 of the county code is what you all take care of there. Going back 3 years to 2018, and there's a reason we don't go back further. The state program changed from DCR to DEQ, and also the reporting requirements between the two agencies changed from a fiscal year basis to a calendar year basis, and the data gets a little convoluted in 2017 because of that reason. But 2018, administrative reviews performed by staff, as you can see, there's 76, and then it steadily increased to last year. Staff did 87 administrative reviews. And then the board, over those 3 years, heard 42 cases in 2018, 46 in 19, and 45 in 2020. For the wetlands program, staff did 18 administrative reviews in 2018 and slightly increased to 21 in 2020. And the board heard 8 cases in 2018, 12 in 2019, and 16 last year in 2020. Between the two boards, or the two programs, staff last year in 2020 reviewed 108 administrative cases, and the two boards heard 61 cases. That's, if I do the math correctly, that's about 14 applications a month for the staff to handle between administrative and legislative cases. 13 per month in 2019 and about 11 per month in 2018. So I just want, any questions on any of this? I think it's all stuff you kind of have realized as you sat here over the years that you've gotten a little busier. So.
How long does it take you to do the field work? Like a case, 3 days per case, 4 days?
It does vary by case. Administrative can be anywhere from a couple hours to maybe 6 or 7, depending on the nature of what they're asking. A board case will take between two days and a week between Trevor and myself, and a number of times going out, talking to the contractor, getting clarifications, putting staff reports together and the presentation and everything. So there's a great deal of work that goes behind a board case and a little less that goes behind an administrative case.
I just want to compliment you. I think we know how many times you have to go out and help to make something work, and we are aware of that, I can assure you, sir, and it's appreciated.
Thank you. If you go to the next presentation. The last presentation I want to give tonight is just a really brief overview of the Chesapeake Bay regulatory amendments proposed by the state in the 2020 General Assembly. They are proposed amendments to 9 VAC 25-830, which is Chesapeake Bay preservation. So the General Assembly had amended the state code at section 62.1-44-1572. Basically, they are wanting the Chesapeake Bay program to deal with coastal resiliency and adaptation to sea level rise and climate change. And then they also want preservation of mature trees as water quality protection BMP type things. DEQ put out a PowerPoint and a presentation to go over all of these, and this is taken directly and modified directly from that presentation. But the state is proposing to change these various codes. They will give the localities a 3-year time frame to implement the changes if they are passed. This one, they are proposing for impacts to look at a 30-year time horizon and utilize various models and to examine the impacts on projects and water quality over that 30-year time horizon. There are some limitations. They don't want to allow filling a lot as the sole purpose for sea level rise. It has to be in conjunction with some other measure. And they do want to limit the development in the Seaward 50 except for adaptation measures and things like that. Also, this section here ties in with the wetlands program and their new regulation for living shorelines, and to encourage living shorelines and their understanding of the overlap in jurisdictions, they do want to reduce the review time of living shoreline projects at the Chesapeake Bay Board level. And then the regulatory amendment that deals with trees, they just want to recognize that mature trees within existing framework provide a great deal of water quality, and they want to modify the existing general performance criteria for RPAs. All of this, all of the tree type changes would be at an administrative review type level. So basically what they're saying is if you remove a tree for a sight line, you need to replace a tree. If a tree needs to come down because it's dead or dying, you need to replace a tree. This one, the design of a driveway, if it meets certain characteristics, can qualify for an administrative exception. And what they're doing is they want to add for the, as long as it's not removing mature trees, then, so there's a third caveat to that one. Buffer establishment, you know, when ag lands are converted to other uses, that the full buffer is restored, including reestablishing trees. And where vegetated areas on encroachment parcels, that they, the planting should be, that wording to be changed to the planting of trees to the maximum extent practicable. Again, all the tree modifications are administrative to the extent that I've been able to find. Removal of trees for shoreline projects, which depending on, you all know, depending on the type of shoreline it is, that is an acceptable form of shoreline control. If there's a mature tree at the top of a vertical bluff, to take the pressure off the bluff, remove the tree. Now they're wanting to preserve trees to the maximum extent practicable and or replace them. But most important, the public comment period for this began February 1st. Public comment period closes in 90 days, which is May 3rd. And then in late June, at some unspecified time, the proposed amendments will go to the State Water Control Board for final approval and enactment. Be happy to answer any questions. I know that was really, really broad brush overview.
So, Mr. Wilson, we currently strive to minimize the impacts to mature trees. So I don't see that as a dramatic change.
It is for us, for our county, I agree with you.
I noticed reestablishment of forested or, they use the word planting for a change in use.
Yeah, some of these terms aren't defined or aren't defined very well at this point in time.
Okay.
And that is certainly comments that other localities have made to the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission and to the Virginia Municipal Stormwater Association for their inclusion of those comments to DEQ.
And I can perhaps understand how the resiliency comments in lower lying jurisdictions may have a more pronounced impact, but how do you believe those comments would impact our process or consideration in James City County?
There are certain portions of the county that it could have a greater effect on than others.
Can you give me an example of how that would be incorporated into a hypothetical case?
Say Powhatan Shores, which we know floods or has flooded historically. If somebody was to propose, say, a swimming pool out there, and the regs aren't clear, do they have to include some kind of resiliency measure in that? And then what does that involve? What does it look like? Is it a retaining wall and filling the backyard to elevation 10 and raising the house and that kind of stuff? Or is it?
Have you seen the model that they mentioned?
I know of the model they've mentioned. I haven't looked specifically into it. Some other localities east of us have great concern with that model. And no pun intended, I would let them carry the water on this. They would be much more affected by those types of language change. I'll be honest with you, I haven't quite wrapped my head around it. We're in weekly, bi-monthly meetings with other localities, HRPDC, VAMSA, trying to.
So I'm curious about the model, and maybe in these meetings, if you could bring that information back to the board, the variables that would be input, and then the recommendations that are output from it.
Right, and one question that hasn't been answered yet is who performs that analysis? Is it the applicant? Is it their consultant? Is it staff? Is it a combination? Is it the board? Those things have yet to be fleshed out.
Plan to have a workshop for us sometime in the near future, reference to.
If the board would like a work session, we can certainly put one together.
I was just asking that.
I think it would be wise, Mr. Waltrip, but I haven't scheduled anything. We will. There are no meetings. There's no Wetlands or Chesapeake Bay Board meeting in March, so I would suggest if we wanted to do a work session, we do it in the second half of March. And we can coordinate by email on that for applicable time that everybody can get together. And I would also recommend that the two alternates attend, Bob and Mike.
I concur.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I think that closes board considerations. There are no matters of special privilege. There will be no March meeting for the Wetlands or Chesapeake Bay Boards, but it sounds like we will coordinate through email for a work session. And can I have a motion to adjourn?
Move.
Meeting adjourned.